各位女士、各位先生，欢迎大家光临第10届亚太地区非政府组织环境会议。今天是议程的第2天。那首先我们第一场呢的专题演讲的主持人呢是林义仁林教授，让我们先欢迎林教授。
大家早安。Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor as the chair to host Mr. John Seed's speech. John Seed is the founder and director of the Rainforest Information Center in Australia. Since 1979, he has been involved in a direct action which has resulted in the protection of Australian rainforests. John is a deep ecologist. According to his explanation, an important teaching of deep ecology is to ask yourself a deeper question. With Joanna Macy, Pat Fleming, and Professor Arnie Nace, he wrote Thinking Like a Mountain, Toward a Council of All Beings, which has now been translated into 10 languages, including Tibetan language. However, among them, there's no Chinese version at the moment. It's a pity. And I do hope that we will have this version in a very near future. John is a good poet, songwriter, and filmmaker, and has produced 5 albums of environmental songs and numerous films. In 1995, John was awarded the Order of Australia Medal by the Australian government for services to conservation and the environment. He is a fellow of the Finholm Foundation, and occasionally scholar in residence at the Design Institute. Actually, I think I can continue to introduce John's great work for a longer time, because simply it's too many. However, I would reserve my last minutes to some understandings about John which are very dear to me. To me, he is a very special and rare person that can combine activism, academic work, arts, and spiritual thinking, and more importantly, strike them at a very perfect balance. To most of us, including me, those things are somehow contradictory to each other. So, I would say we are so lucky today to have John Seed with us. He is not merely a keynote speaker for the conference, but a great mind mentor among us. And I believe many of the SOW members will share a similar view with me upon the past experiences of Council of All Beings in Taiwan. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our very honorable guest, John Seed.
Thanks so much, Iran. In spite of the modern delusion of alienation, of separation from the living earth, we are not aliens. We belong here. The human being is earthborn, the result of 4,000 million years of continuous evolution. And the complex, exquisite biology from which we emerged inevitably remains the matrix, the grounding of any sane humanity. We've all heard the alarming news. For example, Dr. Raymond Dassin, Professor of Biology from the University of California, announced the Third World War has begun. It is being waged against the Earth. More recently, at the end of 2009, Professor Kevin Anderson, Director of the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change and one of the United Kingdom's most senior climate scientists, stated that only around 10% of the world's population, around 500 million people, will survive if global temperatures rise by 4 degrees centigrade. 2 years earlier, the IPCC told the world that at current rates of increase of fossil fuel emissions, we are heading towards a rise in global average temperature of around 6 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, leading to mass extinctions on a virtually uninhabitable planet. The proceedings for the National Academy of Sciences has reported that current fossil fuel emissions are exceeding this worst-case scenario, and in August of 2010, NAOS stated that the science of climate change is in the category of those theories that had been so thoroughly examined and tested and supported by so many independent observations and results that their likelihood of subsequently being found to be wrong is vanishingly small. Such conclusions and theories are then regarded as settled facts. We have all heard the news, yet it has not changed our behaviour except in rather trivial ways. So how will we change our thinking and our behaviour? What is needed? Not more horrifying statistics, surely. Everybody already knows. We feel helpless and disempowered. Scientists warn that we are the last generation of humanity that may have the chance to avert biological collapse and the destruction of the systems that support complex life on Earth. Professor Paul Ehrlich warns us that we are sawing off the branch that we're sitting on. To me, this indicates a psychological problem. No matter how valuable the timber in that branch might be, clearly a foolish move. I graduated in psychology at Sydney University in the mid-1960s. After a stint as a systems engineer for IBM in London, but in 1979, by chance, I found myself embroiled in what turned out to be the first direct actions in defence of rainforests, not only in Australia, but anywhere in the world. For the next 5 minutes of my talk, I will project behind me part of the film titled Earth First, which I made about the protection of Australia's rainforests. The film can be viewed online, and after the film, I will project the address of the website where you can find the script of this talk, with hyperlinks to this film and to many other documents and videos that expand on this talk for those who are interested. The film segment that you will see shows the campaign which stopped the damming of the Franklin River in Tasmania in 1986. The first scene shows Bob Brown, who is now leader of the Australian Green Party, being dragged away by police to allow a bulldozer to proceed. Terania Creek was the site of this action, and it happened to be adjacent to the community where I had been living for 5 years. I somehow found myself involved in the defence of the rainforest there, and suddenly everything changed. I heard the trees screaming. I heard them calling to us for help, and I couldn't resist that call. If I went to see a psychiatrist and said that I heard the trees screaming, wouldn't my experience be reduced to a purely personal pathology? It would show that there was something wrong with me. Perhaps that he would want to speak to me about my childhood. At first my experience was frightening and bewildering. The trees screaming? How could this be? In later years, as I studied the matter, I discovered that this rainforest that I had found myself defending was part of the original flora of Australia. 130 million years ago, when Australia was part of the mighty supercontinent Gondwanaland, joined to South America and Antarctica, before the continents drifted apart, all of it was covered in rainforest. Indeed, my ancestors were evolving within this very rainforest for nearly all of those 130 million years. And it is only during the last few million years that we sought our fortunes down on the ground. So it became less surprising to see how some kind of psychological or spiritual contact with the rainforest was possible. And it became rather more surprising that more people didn't seem to be experiencing it in this way. After Terania Creek, I went on to start the Rainforest Information Centre, the first NGO in the world to have the rainforests on its agenda, with forest protection projects from India to Ecuador, from New Guinea to Siberia. However, it soon became apparent that the Earth could not be protected one forest at a time. In spite of our successful direct actions defending the subtropical rainforests of New South Wales in 1981, the temperate rainforests of Tasmania in 1982, and the tropical rainforests of far north Queensland in 1986, it was clear that for every forest protected during those years, thousands of forests disappeared around the world. And of course, the planet could not be saved one issue at a time. While we were protecting the forests, a mass extinction of life was underway. 100 species a day lost from the planet, and humanity threatening to choke on our own exhaust gases and other byproducts of our progress. By the early 1980s, it was obvious to me that unless we could somehow address the underlying psychological or spiritual disease that afflicts modern humanity and allows us to imagine that we can somehow profit from the destruction of our own life support systems, unless we could deal with this madness, all of our actions and projects were merely symbolic. You can't just save a forest. It's either going to be a green planet or a bowl of dust. It was at this point that I discovered deep ecology. And for the first time, found an analysis of our situation that helped me understand how we had come to our awful plight and perhaps what we can do about it. Deep ecology is the name of a philosophy of nature that has been exerting profound effect on environmentalism in recent decades. Over thousands of years, modern humans have developed an anthropocentric or human-centred perspective. Where I come from, this anthropocentrism stems from the Judeo-Christian tradition. The modern psyche and all the institutions it has created are based on the idea that the world was created only for the benefit of human beings. Only humans were created in God's image. Only humans have a soul. Only humans have intrinsic value. The only value that other species, rivers, forests, oceans and mountains can have is instrumental value as a resource for humans. The Christian Bible claims that it is humanity's role to subdue and dominate all the other creatures and that they are to be in fear and trembling of us. Within this paradigm, the world is just a stage and we humans are the stars of the drama. Everyone else is just bit players or scenery. Now, the science of ecology, as well as the wisdom of indigenous peoples, denies this perspective. The world is not a pyramid with human beings on the top, but rather the world is a web, and we humans are just one strand in that web. As we destroy the other strands, we destroy ourselves. After thousands of years of conditioning, we have inherited shallow, fictitious selves, disconnected from nature. James Lovelock, the scientist who proposed the Gaia theory, which says that the Earth is not just a lump of rock with resources growing on it, but is a living, integrated being, has said that what we are doing to the Earth is as if the brain were to decide it was the most important organ in the body and started mining the liver. Even though in recent decades our ideas may have changed to incorporate the insights of ecology, ideas are not just in our heads. They're embodied in the way that the world is arranged. All of the institutions of our society and the very language we speak conspire to bind us in this outmoded and now wedded to our powerful technologies and growing populations' deadly way of perceiving our world. Our ideas may change, yet our institutions and personalities were forged in this mould, and we seem incapable of giving substance to our new ecological vision. Arne Næss, Emeritus Professor of Philosophy at Oslo University, the man who coined the term deep ecology, wrote, "It is not enough to have ecological ideas. We have to have ecological identity, ecological self." He pointed out that a sense of responsibility or duty is a treacherous basis for conservation. How many of us are capable of altruism? As long as we are in the grip of the illusion that the Earth is other than our very self, it seems unrealistic to suppose that we can make the very difficult sacrifices in our lives and societies that will be needed to live contentedly within the constraints of the ecological systems. If we can identify with the earth, we don't need altruism. If we have the experience of ourselves, not as isolated, separate, skin-encapsulated egos, but as part of the larger body of the earth, then the defence of nature becomes merely self-defence. And this does not require a highly elevated moral stature. Self-interest comes naturally, and it seems more hopeful to expand the sense of self to include the air, my breath, and water, my blood, and soil, my body, than to suddenly imagine most of us becoming selfless, acting against our perceived self-interest to protect these things. Still, through thousands of years of conditioning, absorbed by osmosis since the day we were born, we have succeeded in creating this incredibly pervasive illusion of separation from nature. Now, the fact that this sense of separation from nature is entirely an illusion can be quickly demonstrated. Anybody who doubts this, I would just ask you to hold your breath for 5 minutes while you think about it. That is, I'm not talking about anything particularly mystical. It is very straightforward. We can name it the atmosphere, and we can say, oh, what a good person that is, sacrificing their self-interest by working to protect the atmosphere instead of making lots of money, as though the atmosphere was out there. But it is not out there. None of it is out there. It is all constantly migrating and cycling through us, whether it's the atmosphere, the water, or the soil. There is no out there. It's all in here. But most modern people don't feel that. As long as the environment is experienced as out there, we may leave it to some special interest group like the Greens to protect while we look after ourselves. The matter changes when we deeply realise that the nature out there and the nature in here are one and the same, are continuous. That the sense of separation, no matter how pervasive, is nonetheless totally illusory. In response to such things, Joanna Macy and I developed a workshop of experiential deep ecology rituals called the Council of All Beings, and with Arnie Ness wrote a book in 1986 called Thinking Like a Mountain Towards the Council of All Beings. Some of us will be gathering tomorrow at the Society of Wilderness to experience the Council of All Beings workshop together. In this workshop, we remember our rootedness in nature. We recapitulate our entire evolutionary journey and release the memories locked in our DNA. We experience the fact that every cell in our body is descended in an unbroken chain 4 billion years old, through fish that learned to walk the land, reptiles whose scales turned to feathers and fur and became mammals, evolving through to the present. We further extend our sense of identity in the Council of All Beings itself, where we find an ally in the natural world, make a mask to represent that ally, and allow the animals and plants and landscapes to speak through us. We are shocked at the very different view of the world that emerges from their dialogue. Creative suggestions for human actions emerge, and we invoke the powers and knowledge of these other life forms to empower us in our lives. We remember that, until quite recently, humans have been doing ceremonies like this for a long time, hundreds of thousands of years perhaps, and to our surprise, it comes very easily and naturally to us. Invariably, we are shocked to hear voices that we have never heard before, profound truths revealed. One of the rituals at the Council of All Being is a mourning. We grieve for all that is being lost from the world, the species lost, the landscapes destroyed. Only if we allow ourselves to feel the pain of the earth can we be effective in her healing. That is why the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh said that in order to heal the earth, the most important thing that we can do is to hear inside ourselves the sounds of the earth crying. We have a deep longing for reconnection with the earth. With this longing repressed, a host of displacement activities arise. We feel a pervasive anguish and emptiness and spend our lives trying to fill the gaping wound with all manner of stuff. We have to dig up and chop down the earth to make and power all the hair dryers and microwave ovens and electric toothbrushes with which we try unsuccessfully to fill that hole. It's not really all these material goods that we want, however, but a certain psychological state, and we imagine will follow. It never does follow, of course, and no amount of material stuff brings us peace. In response to the question, how is this expansion of identification to be developed, Arnie Ness responded that what I needed are community therapies to develop ecological self. At first I was very excited by this, as it gave me a new perspective on the Council of All Beings. Although I had facilitated many such workshops, I'd never seen them in this light. After some time, however, I came to see certain shortcomings in the therapy metaphor. While on Third Mesa in New Mexico, I was privileged to witness an ancient indigenous Hopi Indian ritual. It took place in the town square of the oldest continuously inhabited community in the Western Hemisphere. Although the masks were more splendid and the drumbeat more confident, in many ways it was identical to the Council of All Beings, and these people had been doing this regularly for thousands and thousands of years. But therapies aren't supposed to last for thousands of years. These ceremonies and rituals have no end. Perhaps the tendency to lose our connection with the living earth is very ancient. Perhaps it began as soon as we began to think. What else could explain the fact that every intact indigenous culture that we look at has at its root a series of such ceremonies and rituals whereby the human community can acknowledge and renew and nourish our interconnectedness with the land and the rest of the earth community. So, although the Council of All Beings is undeniably experienced as being therapeutic by participants, it reveals, I think, a deeper significance. One remembers Joseph Campbell's warning that the chief sources of anxiety in our age are the loss of myth and ritual. We must heal our culture so that it once more provides us with authentic connection between our soul and the earth. For me, the real work must include reclaiming these rituals and the empowerment that they offer, and to take that empowerment and spread it through our lives, finding ways to serve the earth. As I wrote in Thinking Like a Mountain, for myself, this transformation of perspective from anthropocentrism to deep ecology resulted from my actions on behalf of Mother Earth. In struggling to protect the rainforests near my home, I found that the sense of I am protecting the rainforests changed into I am part of the rainforest protecting myself. I am that part of the rainforest only recently emerged into thinking. What a relief. The thousands of years of imagined separation are over, and we begin to recall our true nature. Furthermore, the spiritual awakening that took place while participating in the defence of the rainforests has obviated the need for any other form through which to experience the divine. The earth itself has become my sacred text. However, it is clear that many people's love of earth is mediated through one of the great faith traditions, and that each of these traditions has within its texts and liturgies many expressions of ecological sensibility and love of earth. These days, the earth suffers under the thrall of the religion of the marketplace, which is the dominant spiritual mode of these times. Both nature and the faith traditions falter under the onslaught of the religion of economics, which is, I believe, the most pious religion the world has ever known. Worshipping mammon in skyscraping temples and shopping malls, not just one day a week, but 7. With worshippers all the more fervent by virtue of being completely unconscious that their supposed secularism is in fact a profound spiritual faith. I've written about this at some length last year for the University of Western Sydney's Handbook of Social Ecology, and you can find the link at that URL. I believe that we need to nourish both the growing shoots of ecological concern within the great faith traditions and also nourish spiritual understanding and respect within the conservation movement. Part of my work has been exploring the overlap of ecology with Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism and Hinduism. Earth is where all these mighty faiths meet. Each has grown from the soul of the planet, and it is in the earth that they are reconciled. I spoke of this yesterday in the Deep Ecology, Eco-Psychology and Eco-Spirituality Forum. I have devoted my life to the protection and conservation of nature for over 30 years. During that time, I have seen many of my colleagues fall by the wayside, burnt out by the pain of watching the wild nature that they love retreating under the onslaught of development. It seems to me that if we want to be able to sustain our gaze decade after decade on such a bleak vision as what is happening to our world, we require constant empowerment and renewal. And these deep ecology practices have served that purpose for me and many of my friends. Fueled by the empowerment we receive from the deep ecology experiential practices, my colleagues and I have worked on many practical projects for the conservation of nature. I will briefly mention a few of these, and if you're interested, you can learn more by following the hyperlinks in the online version of this talk. In Papua New Guinea, we provided tribal landowners with small portable sawmills and training in ecological forest management so that they could sustainably utilise their own forests and expel the multinational logging companies. The next piece isn't in my script, so I hope the translators will bear with me. But I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this project. On the west coast of Papua New Guinea, the logging companies were destroying everything in their path, and the people had no alternative because no alternative development options were available to them other than selling their trees to the multinational logging companies. Funded by the Australian Government Aid Agency and the Australian Council of Churches, we began to intervene in the path of the logging companies by offering these communities the choice that we would provide them with a small portable sawmill which could cut only a tiny fraction of what these huge companies were cutting, and we would offer them training in ecological forest management. In this way, instead of getting instead of getting $3 a cubic metre, which is what the logging companies in the 1980s were offering for the raw logs, the people were able to receive $450 a cubic metre for the sawn timber. So they could get 150 times as much money for each tree that they worked themselves as they were previously getting. We made 7 such interventions in some of the most valuable forests, and more than 1 million hectares of rainforest was protected in this fashion. In India in 2009, we worked to stop developments threatening the largest remaining wild population of elephants in Asia. These elephants live in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in the south of India, and they were threatened by 2 separate developments. By enlisting our allies all around the world in a campaign, we were able to turn this from being just a campaign within India itself to becoming an international campaign, and the Indian government eventually stopped both of these developments, and those elephants remained free. Last year, also in India, we worked alongside indigenous people to prevent the mining for bauxite of the sacred mountain, which is their god. This year we have been working once again on protecting the Tasmanian forests, and in March this year we joined the International Actions for the Forests of Borneo. In April, I travelled to different Aboriginal communities in Taiwan, showing films and telling stories about our successful actions to stop dams destroying wild nature in Australia, and one of those communities gave me this great t-shirt. In August, we had actions August this year, we had actions at the Brazil Embassy and outside Parliament House in Canberra as part of worldwide actions to stop dams being built in the Amazon basin and flooding the heart of the Amazon basin. Through the second half of this year, I've been conducting climate change, despair and empowerment workshops around Australia to encourage environmentalists to honour the anguish that we all feel in the light of what is happening to our world. In particular, I've been doing these workshops for the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, the fastest growing youth organisation in Australia, which has grown to 65,000 members in just 3 years. I'd like to conclude by expressing my admiration for the Society of Wilderness who organised this conference and whose tireless volunteers and staff make it such a success. As I've said, I believe that it will be impossible to address the environmental crisis that torments us without also addressing the psychological crises that create the mess we're in. In this, the Society of Wilderness clearly agrees. Their Deputy Chairman, Chun-Ying Chen, is a practicing psychiatrist. They have translated and published the most important volume on eco-psychology into Chinese, and a number of their volunteers are now facilitating experiential deep ecology processes, such as the Council of All Beings. As I mentioned earlier, I will be conducting the Council of All Beings tomorrow at the Society of Wilderness Taipei office. Please see any of the SOW staff if you would like to participate. If you can't make it tomorrow, nonetheless register your interest with SOW, as they will be conducting more such workshops in the months to come, which will be even better than mine, as they will be in the Chinese language. Or else, invite SOW to provide a facilitator to offer such a workshop for your NGO. This will certainly help to empower your NGO and create an opportunity for new vision, excitement and enthusiasm to emerge. Thank you very much. So I'd just like to hand it over to you. I'd be happy to answer questions, but I'd be happier still to hear your opinion.
Thank you very much, John. May I ask you a special comment on the nuclear disaster in Japan? What will respond to the nuclear disaster in March 11?
Well, I mean, of course, my response is the same as everybody's response, I suppose, which is utter horror and grief at such a tragedy. And I was very pleased to hear in yesterday's keynote address the criticism of the arrogance with which they built the diesel generators to cool the fuel rods right by the seaside, and that clearly, you know, these kind of technologists ask us to trust them, but I think we have to be very, very careful now to look at the consequences of these not only nuclear but genetically modified organisms and other new technological developments that may threaten us in equally savage ways.
Hi, John. As I said yesterday, I heard one of your talks back in the 80s in San Francisco area. Nice to see you again. Say, I've been to TASI quite a few times the last few years. I took a group of students in 07 from California, and some really good friends. Maybe you know Sarah Lloyd and Rhonda Gorka of the Naturalist Club here. And I know they're doing some great work. I'm curious about the Tarkine. I've been over there. What's the latest on the Tarkine up in the northwest in Tassie? Okay.
So this is a question about the Tarkine Wilderness in the northwest of Tasmania, which is the largest such wilderness. Actually, it's the second largest temperate rainforest wilderness in the world. The largest one is the Tongass rainforest in Alaska, and certainly the biggest in Australia. And many of the threats of logging, which were the main threats in the past, have subsided because of successful campaigns in Japan, where the Japanese paper companies now refuse to buy wood chips that are coming from Australian rainforests. And so the logging companies can't sell the wood chips anymore. The problem is that all over Australia there's a huge mining boom. I suppose it's all over the world. And it's largely driven by the incredible hunger of Chinese industry. So Australia has completely avoided the global financial crisis by opening up even more of our mineral resources for export. And the Tarkine, unfortunately, has tin and coal and other minerals, and that will be the next battleground.
请大会帮我翻译哈，江旭你好哈，在我的思考中，我是一个乡下长大的孩子，然后在我乡下成长的土地当中，我的思考中，江旭你好哈，我是一个乡下长大的孩子哈，然后在我乡下所看到的土地的变化。 那我的经验中，我的思考中，我的信仰中，大地啊，我一直觉得大地就是我的母亲呐，也是我们的第一个母亲呐。这是我从大地当中的乡村的经验当中，我自我观察当中产生的一个信仰。那今天听到江旭的所说的今天的一个思维，就是说，原来我也是大自然的一部分。 然后大自然原来就是我对这个思维跟我原本的一个思维、原本的信仰就好像让我好像这个思维当中开始了一个转换期。我想请问一下江旭，就是说这样的两个思维有什么不一样？是不是可以给我一点看法？谢谢江旭。
I only received the headset in the middle of your talk, but from all that I heard, there is no difference at all. The question, the speaker was talking about his childhood and the experience that he had of being one with the earth, and that the earth was his mother, and quite a poetic presentation of that. And he asked me if there was any difference between what he had said and my experience.
There is a question up there, and then this gentleman later.
John, I'm glad that you mentioned about the campaign that's about the issue of climate change in Australia, but it also gives me some very conflict image about Australia. As you might know, that is maybe most people in Taiwan we are quite agree with the truth or impact of climate changes on the planet. I know that in Australia, particularly there's a major media stream like the Australian. There is a big voice about the skepticism, about what is going to happen, and they are ignore or they are deny these kind of impacts, particularly from the perspective of Australia. So I would like to have your comment on this issue and how the campaign will be promoted. Either we say teach those skepticism about what Australia can play in this kind of campaign. So this all given the second question, I would like to hear from you. As we know that not only the nature resource like rainforest, like biodiversity, all the biodiversity, but there's also natural resources which is deep under the ground of Australia. It provides us the sources of carbon dioxide emission to air. I would say that we're sucked by all the big monsters like China, all the so-called the golden bricks country. So what's your comment on this? I mean, how your efforts or the effort you try to lead the world to against this kind of dark forces to suck all the natural resources from our planet?
Well, I have to say that for the first time in my life, I'm finding it hard to feel proud of being Australian because I find that Australia is the biggest emitter per capita of greenhouse gases, even bigger than the United States and other countries, and it has it's full of skeptics and people who are denying what clearly is undeniable now. And so I don't know what we can do about this. The most hopeful sign in Australia is the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, which is now enlisting youth not just at universities but at high schools, and they are making their voices heard. And it's very difficult for politicians when confronted by young people who insist that they have a right to a future. It's very difficult for politicians to do their usual kind of lives. So the main campaign that I'll be working on in this coming year is to try and slow the spread of the exploration and mining of coal seam gas, which is releasing huge amounts of methane from under the ground and pretending to be a solution to climate change when actually it's an even worse part of the problem, it seems, than the coal mining is, which has been the backbone of Australia's economy. So I'm afraid that Australia is not in a really good position to be offering advice to other places in the world at all.
And then we have questions.
Yeah, I have a question that recently we have found that in Bangladesh, a lot of old ships are landing over there for shipbreaking. It has turned into a graveyard for old ships. So the question is that because there's a protest against that locally, but that's not very strong enough, because this shipbreaking is actually causing enormous ecological damage to the coast of Bay of Bengal and other parts. So do you think any sort of solidarity can be established with these people who are protesting now so that their movement can be strengthened? Because otherwise they won't be able to do anything, because the mighty powerhouse is actually the back of this shipbreaking industry, is very lucrative and getting a lot of revenue over in a short period of time. So that's my question, whether something can be done.
Well, I certainly hope so. I've seen some reports about the toxic wastes that come from breaking up these old ships and the impacts on the health of the people that are involved as well as on the health of the land. And of course, I mean, I suppose the trouble is that there are so many problems in the world that it's very difficult to know, how to best, how to prioritise them. But I hope that you succeed in creating a movement of international solidarity to help the movement in Bangladesh to clean up this thing.
Oh, thank you very much for your talk. It's a great, exciting one. But one thing, I was really impressed that you mentioned that up there and in here is quite important. But on the other hand, it is definitely existing, the distance is definitely existing. For example, in the case of the Franklin Dam in Tasmania, it is unfortunate that the dam builders in Tasmania just moved to Laos after you finish you stop the Franklin Dam inside Tasmania. And also logging company in Tasmania moved to Laos or Southeast Asian countries. So even though you could stop some disruptive development inside Tasmania, but it's moved to around the world now. So how do you overcome this kind of distance? Not only up there and in here, but also in Tasmania and in Laos is one of the distance. How do you feel? How do you overcome this?
When Professor Arnie Ness, who coined the term deep ecology, when he was asked for a definition of deep ecology, his answer was asking deeper questions. So in one way this was a kind of an unsatisfying answer when one wanted something more concrete. But it reflected his philosophical heritage, which was a philosophy from ancient Greece called skepticism. And skepticism, as a philosophical term, isn't quite the same as in the vernacular use of the word in English. Philosophically, skepticism says that the question is always more important than the answer, that the answer is always contingent and temporary, and there can be many different answers. The purpose of a good answer is to make the question deeper. So, before I attempt to give an answer, I have to say, first of all, what an important question that is. And that I don't really have an answer to that question, but I would say that we need a consciousness that goes, of course, beyond national boundaries, so that victories in one place don't merely result in losses in another place, because we all live on one planet and the air and the water don't recognise national boundaries, and the biodiversity of the whole world is disappearing. It's not that we imagined that we could have an island of well-being in Australia while the rest of the world is destroyed. You know, it's ridiculous, but somehow people still behave as if you could protect one little place at the expense of others. And I think how we can respond to this and how we can address this, that's a very important question. Thank you.
Yeah, very important question.
And are they?
Hi, John. Nice to see you again. In terms of climate change, particularly for those small island states, and they are confronting the issue of life and death. So what we can do for them, and of course for us, the Taiwan and middle-sized island. So particularly for those small state island states in the Asian Pacific region. Thank you.
I know that there is a strong climate justice movement that's growing in many places in the world, including in Australia. In Australia, it's a group called the Friends of the Earth, who are the most prominent in that, in trying to explain to Australians that the consequences of our exhaust gases, of all of the CO2 and the methane that we produce, that the first people who are going to be impacted are people far away who have little responsibility for producing the problem, but they are the ones who are going to experience the problem. I'm afraid that most Australians are not particularly interested in things like that. They're mainly interested in becoming richer, and Australians have built a kind of a wall against refugees from wars that Australia itself has helped to create. Some of those refugees by going to war alongside the United States in the Middle East but now is putting up these incredible barriers to prevent these refugees from finding refuge. So the Australian conservation movement is trying its best to raise these sorts of issues, and sometimes bringing people from Palau and from other places to Australia to tell their story. But I can't boast of any great success.
We have less than 10 minutes. Are there more questions?
麻烦翻译一下。我最近到中国，因为工作原因到中国积了，也发现很多秘密，就是不要中国对全世界采购，对工业产品、工业原料跟农粮食品都是用大型的采购计划，就是合约式的这样去列其他，尤其在亚洲国家的这些跟物质，包括矿产跟食物，不然江西在这个也是为了环保这个议题为基础，他们想说也建议给这些未来可能已经受害或未来受害的国家有什么建议？谢谢。
Well, I'm sorry that I have to say I don't know to so many of the questions that I'm being asked, but of course Australia is also one of these countries. Chinese companies and Indian companies as well are buying up huge areas of Australia to extract the coal especially, but also other minerals, and we seem to be helpless in the face of the wealth, and there is a movement that is growing, but so far we've been unable to succeed.
Hi John, thank you for your inspiring speech. I will share some experience and some feedbacks. Because when I was a little girl, and the education or people around me, they taught me that I have to respect and love nature, animals, environment around us. And after we grew up gradually, and sometimes that's really ironic because people around us and education, they told us have to be strong, but we have to focus on how successful we are. In business, especially like developing, and we have to become stronger and successful. Business sort of things actually that's destroying our precious environment. And I've ever searched some information about permaculture, and that's really famous, also famous in Australia because of the founder, derives from there. And I really wonder your opinions about permaculture. Thank you.
Well, I'd much rather hear more of your opinions about it because I don't know a great deal, but it sounds great. Tell us more.
And also I wanna say thank you about the clip, the first one. It reminds me about why I'm so involved in green, because of the music tragic event happened in Taiwan, in Miaoli, last year. It's also very similar. Governments, they sent those, I was almost saying 30, but sorry. And they send those cars into farms and just, they don't care about anything but only for their benefits. Yeah, everybody knows that. And as for my opinions about permaculture, because it focuses on permanent culture, agriculture, and it also combines our ancestors' wisdom. And yeah, I did join courses, but it's only 2 weeks only, so I really want to get involved more. It happened this year, in April, March. And I was inspired a lot. Yeah, but it takes action. Yes.
Thank you. Well, it's 10 o'clock now.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone. Thanks so much to the Society of Wilderness for organising this event, and I'm looking forward to some inspiring panels throughout the day. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Here's some information that the board wants to tell us.
各位亲爱的好朋友们哦，真的很开心能够在这次研讨会有John来跟我们分享这个生态心理的部分。所以呢，我们也在明天白天的时间呢，安排了1天的众生大会工作坊这个活动。所以呢，如果你觉得你非常希望参加的话呢，等一下请你到会场外到我们的报道台去注册众生大会1日工作坊。那原则上呢，我们明天的行程会是在室内会在荒野保护协会总会的办公室，我们有会议厅在那边进行，那是1天的活动。那同时呢，其实我们还开了很多条的参访路线，有一些路线已经满了，那我们现在同时还有一个路线还可以提供大家来参加，就是我们的台大的Eco Tour、Eco Walk， 就是我们明天呢会在这边福华这边集合，那我会散步，大家一起散步到台大校园以及自来水博物馆还有宝藏园。那这个只有半天的行程，所以如果国外的朋友你只能参加半天，下午要回国的话，这个 tour 应该会比较轻松，时间比较弹性。那还有最后一个事情就是，如果不管您是报名哪一个我们的户外参访行程那请您务必在中午前到我们的服务台去拿您的行前通知。那我们非常感谢 John 这是他今年第2度来到台湾，跟我们分享他的生态心理部分，让我们再次掌声，谢谢 John， 谢谢。那我们把这套包含给我们的司仪，谢谢。
谢谢各位来宾的参与。我们等一下呢就有点心的休息时间，那么是到10点半。但在这之前呢，想要再度提醒，还没有取得午餐的餐票的来宾，如果您今天中午计划在这边用餐的话，我们有提供荤跟素的餐盒，那请您去报到台的地方去拿餐券。那再来是在点心这个部分呢，我们在2楼跟3楼的会场呢，我们都提供了非常丰盛的点心跟饮料。那也顺带我们也有提供了非常多的参展的摊位，所以欢迎大家踊跃去参观。那3楼呢有更多的点心跟饮料在提供好，谢谢各位，那请大家10点半的时候再度回到现场，谢谢。